We're sitting here with Aaron Reed from Littler Mendelson, a long-term EO sponsor. We're celebrating Aaron's 14th year at Littler,
That's right.
and we couldn't be prouder to have you as our longest standing sponsor of EO South Florida at 12 years.
Yeah,
So
thanks.
we're thrilled to be here with you today. And why don't you start off by kind of giving us your timeline of being a member of EO South Florida and a sponsor for the past 12 years, and how that's changed, what that's done for your business, and for you personally as well.
Okay. So I got involved with EO because several friends of mine from growing up, David Redlick, Matthew Cutler, Isaac Ben Shmuel, were all members. And we were out to dinner and they often would talk about the organization. And I'm just a little lawyer in a law firm, and so I couldn't be a member, but Matt Cutler suggested sponsorship. And so I looked into it with his help and joined. And I think at the time there were 50 or 60 members. So the organization has changed significantly. Obviously, you're at least 3 times that now. And over time, I've met, as everyone in EO knows, some of the most wonderful people that are walking around. And I've helped so many people with a wide array of different types of problems. So the types of things I've helped people with hasn't changed that much. But quite funny enough, as the membership has grown, somehow I've known an inverse, a little bit less people, because it's a little more dispersed. So it's always great to have an opportunity to talk kind of about what I do as an employment lawyer. So I'm really glad to have a chat today.
One of the things I know entrepreneurs want to do is protect their businesses. What are some things that entrepreneurs should think about either annually, every 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is, as they're planning their future and their growth? What should be the things that they're thinking about from an employment perspective?
Sure. So a lot of what should be thought about in the employment arena is preventative stuff. It's easy and obvious when you get a demand letter or a lawsuit to say, hey, I got to call my lawyer, but there are so many things that can be done in advance of that, not to prevent a lawsuit, because that's unfortunately impossible in America, but to minimize the disruption and to put it in a better place positioning wise so that it can be disposed of quicker and cheaper. And so things like having written policies, having handbooks, training your employees on various things related to your policies. For example, my firm does discrimination and harassment training. And if an EO business has 15 or more members, the discrimination and harassment laws apply to them. And there are defenses available if you have a policy, if you train your employees and someone sues for harassment but never complained, there's a potential complete bar to damages. And so there are things like that that if you've never trained your employees on are worth looking into, either from me or someone else who's an expert in the area.
That's fantastic. One of the things that I know EO members and entrepreneurs in general are interested in learning about is what it constitutes an employee versus a contractor. It's something that could get you in trouble later on, if not addressed up front. And I see you smiling because I'm sure that's a question. There's probably a lot of entrepreneurs that come in here with this exact issue. So why don't you give the viewership a kind of a glimpse at what that means?
I am smiling because it is a somewhat frequent thing that's come up with EO members, and independent contractors are wonderful and lovely because it gives a business a lot of advantages. A lot of businesses classify people that way because that's what the individual asked for, but the law could not care less. The law says you're either an employee or you're not. And with respect to misclassifying someone, the fact that they signed a piece of paper saying I'm an independent contractor is meaningless. If the IRS knocks on your door and says, we want to take a look at the 73 people you have classified as independent contractors, if they determine that someone was in fact an employee, there could be a massive amount of potential liability. If someone gets injured out in the field as your independent contractor and they decide, I want to sue you and you don't have workers' comp insurance, workers' comp has immunity from certain torts so that you could possibly have workers' comp insurance cover that, whereas instead they could sue you in court for negligence, and you might, may or may not have separate coverage for something like that. Unemployment is a whole nother potential issue. And so whether or not someone's an independent contractor, it's really about directing and controlling their work. If your workforce has a lot of people who are independent contractors, but they show up at your business every day, you train them, you tell them what to do, how to do it, where to do it. If you have a measure of control, they're probably your employee. A true independent contractor is, my window's broken at my house, I hire someone to show up and fix it. It's a discrete short-term project. I pay them a fixed fee for it. And whether or not the person I hired shows up or someone else shows up, it makes no difference. I just expect the job will get done. There's a big spectrum between employee and that example, but I think a lot of EO people just slap the IC label without ever thinking about it. And if you've never thought about it, you're exposing your business to a pretty big risk.
Yeah, it's great information, and I think it's something that a lot of EO companies could use, including my own. This brings me to my next point about protecting yourself. Hourly wages are changing for fast food restaurants nationally. You have a changing landscape of the hourly employee across the land. Can you kind of give us, the 30-second or 45-second version of what entrepreneurs should be thinking about? And we have a lot of professional organizations. We have folks in EO that run fast food restaurants, fast casual restaurants, manufacturing restaurants, warehousing, you name it. A lot of our employees have hourly folks that work for them, and this is something that could be a big pitfall if not addressed.
So EO members who have known me for a while have heard me bang the drum on wage and hour stuff a lot. In South Florida, there are more wage and hour lawsuits filed than literally anywhere in the United States, except maybe California. And so what that means is that's kind of the thing that EO members are most likely to reach out and say, uh-oh, I got this lawsuit. A lot of it is misclassification related, slapping a salary on someone and thinking that's all that matters, when whether or not someone's exempt from hourly overtime is a whole analysis that relates to their job duties in addition to whether they're paid a salary. And on the hourly side, you got to make sure, obviously, at a minimum, that people are recording their start time, their stop time, their break time, start and stop. You should have people sign off on their hours each week that they're accurate and true. You should have procedures and policies in place with respect to breaks, with respect to overtime. If someone works overtime, some companies have come to me and said, we didn't approve it, so we're not paying it. If they work it, they got to get it paid. There are lots of policies you can have to enforce your hourly practices, but simply assuming that it's all okay is kind of a pants at the ankles thing. There are some basic things that can be done that can really, really minimize the potential of having a big exposure on a case like that.
Fascinating, and something that I believe all companies should be taking a look at. And if you have an employee and you're paying them $25,000 a year, and they're working 70 hours a week because they're an ambitious employee and they're really doing a great job for your organization, you could have overtime issues with that employee if they wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, and a potential or a common problem is that when you said that person was salaried, you didn't track their hours. And then when they sue you and say, I worked 70 hours a week, you don't have a single piece of paper to push back on it. And you'll say, well, our computer's logged and our cameras, and that kind of evidence takes time and money and effort. And when they're suing you for $6,000, you're just going to write the check because it's not worth it to fight all that stuff. It doesn't mean that $25,000 person might not have been properly classified as exempt, but if you're just assuming it without ever having someone looked at it, then that's a mistake.
Look, we know in South Florida that there's a lot of lawyers willing to take a lot of cases on contingency and come after deep pocket organizations such as EO members. We know that for sure, and it's something that is really, really important for us to protect ourselves. That brings me to another really good point. How do EO members engage with you to make sure that their documents are up to date? Do you recommend every year, every 2 years? And then what would be the average cost that an entrepreneur should budget for relative to, I equate it to going to see your cardiologist or a doctor to make sure that you could run your company, right? This is about avoiding risk. And so can you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy, going to the doctor or bringing your car in for, the 20,000 mile service. A lot of people ignore this stuff because they don't want to spend the money. But the truth is, it's not overly expensive. Not enough EO people have taken advantage of this opportunity to have me do this sort of thing. I've gone to people's businesses and met with them and spent an hour or two just sort of interviewing them about their policies and their practices, and then reviewing their handbooks, their policies, their employment agreements, and giving, kind of revising things or providing handbooks from scratch. I don't think people need to come to me every year or even every 2 years. They should come to me once. And then maybe a few years later come back and say, have things changed? What should we revise? But at least to have it one time, to have a few hours to chat and then a few hours of reviewing and revising documents. It depends on how much needs to be done, but typically it's a couple $1,000 and not much more for kind of a basic, look under the hood type of checkup for a meeting, document review, and, adding in a handbook as well.
That'd be great. And I think a couple $1,000 in an environment with working with somebody like yourself is a lot better than working with, handing a check for $6,000 over to the lawyers who are basically, leveraging the success of our businesses.
Yeah, but I will say, none of that stuff will prevent a lawsuit. No matter what you do, you're going to get sued. And what I often tell people is, you should be happy you're a target. It means you're doing okay. The biggest companies in the country get sued the most. And so, but it's about minimizing, when a lawyer shows up and says, I want $80,000 and I have no documentation, I have no leverage. When I show up with a folder and slap it on the table and say, here's the proof, here's the rebuttal, now that case, well, unfortunately, they don't go away for nothing. Maybe I get rid of it for $5,000.
That's great. 5,000 is a lot better than 80,000. The idea of sort of getting sued as you're growing your business, becoming a big business is very important to the entrepreneur group, at EO. So that actually gives people credibility. As they're growing, they get like street cred, entrepreneur cred.
Get your street cred from commercial disputes over big deals that are being made, not unemployment stuff. No one gets street cred from dealing with me in a lawsuit.
This is another interesting question, and one that I believe that a lot of EO members kind of think about as they're sitting down with their general lawyer. Can your general lawyer just put together your employee manual and all the documents you need to run your business?
Maybe, question mark. There's a lot of good general lawyers out there, but would you go to your general practitioner for your heart surgery? There are a lot of nuances that they just can't and won't know, and that they won't have the experience to do. So while your general lawyer might be able to do a non-compete lawsuit, that's not as employment specific. There's commercial litigators on that, but when you're dealing with the more traditional HR type of stuff, they just don't know what they don't know. And also they don't know the attorneys, the usual suspects, as well as we do. And there's value in that as well. And so while there are general lawyers that can do a good job, I think going to experts is just the way to go for any aspect in your life and for your business.
Two things. One, tell us something about Aaron Reed that we do not know. And number two, tell us something about your firm that we do not know.
Sure. So the thing about me that a lot of people might not know is that I have 3 children. I have identical twin daughters who are in 7th grade now, and I have a son who's 14 and he's in 9th grade and he's about 6'2". So the tall gene is alive and well in the family, and work's great, but the family's the thing I'm most proud of by far, as most people in EO I know agree.
Absolutely. So tell me about your firm and what we don't know.
Sure. So, people meet me at an event and they think law firm, Miami, that's the end of it. But I want to make sure people understand Littler Mendelson is the largest employment law firm in the country, in fact, in the world. We have 1,300 attorneys and about 65 offices around the United States. We also have offices in South America, Central America, some areas of the Caribbean like Puerto Rico. We're opening offices in Europe. And so we have people that can help companies that have multi-state, multinational operations all over the place. So rather than needing a lawyer in 3 lawyers in 3 locations from 3 firms, we help companies with all that kind of stuff. And oh, by the way, we also have an immigration practice. So companies, South Florida companies that might be moving employees internationally, that's something we help as well. And so I don't think people realize kind of the large nature of the assistance my firm can provide, even outside of Miami. And so that's something worth pointing out.
That's great. So just to understand that correctly, if I have manufacturing and employees in Turkey or in Italy who build my products and we import them and I have employees over there, you could help me organize and make sure I don't have sort of global exposure to my business?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, depending on the country, we may or may not have an office there. We have one in Italy. We don't in Turkey, but we have connections in almost every significant country in the world. So if we don't have an office there, we probably work with a lawyer or a law firm in that country. So quite frankly, we can get people connections to those countries and the experts in those areas as well.
Fantastic.